I stood there in the warm glow of the honeymoon suite, watching Mira unpack her suitcase with that little smile I'd fallen in love with years ago. Everything felt perfect, like a dream I didn't want to wake up from. Just a week ago, we'd gotten married under a sky full of stars, string lights twinkling above us as we danced our first dance. The wedding wasn't big, but it was ours, small, romantic, unforgettable. Her parents, Clara and Marshall, had been all over the planning, picking flowers and fussing over table settings. I didn't mind much then. I figured they were just excited to see their only daughter tie the knot. Mira looked so happy that night, her white dress glowing in the moonlight as we whispered promises to each other. I thought that was it, the start of forever. But then, out of nowhere, just days after the wedding, Clara and Marshall suggested something odd. A family trip, they called it. Just Mira and them, heading off to Scottsdale for what they said was a relaxing getaway. It hit me like a punch to the gut. We'd barely been married a week, and they wanted to whisk her away already? I didn't love the idea, honestly. It stung. But Myra's eyes lit up when they brought it up. She squeezed my hand and said, "It's just a few days, babe. I'll be back before you know it." I didn't want to be the guy who says no, the jealous husband who can't let his wife breathe. So I swallowed the unease, nodded, and said, "Sure, go have fun." I thought I was being understanding, supportive even. Looking back now, that was my first mistake, and it's one I'll never stop kicking myself for. The moment I agreed, something shifted, like a crack forming in a glass you don't notice until it shatters. I drove her to the airport, kissed her goodbye, and watched her walk off with Clara and Marshall, their suitcases rolling behind them. Clara gave me this tight little smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes, and Marshall just nodded, his face blank as always. I told myself it was fine. She'd be back in 4 days, and we'd pick up right where we left off, newlyweds, head over heels, building our life together. I went home that night, sat on our couch, and stared at the empty space where she'd usually be curled up next to me. The house felt too quiet without her laugh, her humming as she made tea. I tried to shake it off, told myself I was overthinking things. "It's just a trip," I kept repeating in my head. Just a trip. But deep down, I couldn't shake this gnawing feeling, like I'd just handed her over to something I didn't understand. I flipped on the TV, scrolled through my phone, anything to keep busy. I even texted her a quick, "Miss you already," with a heart emoji, hoping she'd reply fast. She did, a simple "miss you too," with a smiley face. That should have calmed me down, right? But it didn't. That night, I barely slept, tossing and turning in our two-big bed, wondering why her parents couldn't wait a little longer to drag her off. Why now? Why so soon? The next morning, I woke up to a picture she sent, her standing by a pool, sunglasses on, smiling wide. "Having fun already," she wrote. I stared at it for a long time, trying to feel happy for her. She looked beautiful like always. But something about the photo felt off, like there was a piece missing I couldn't see. I texted back, "Glad you're enjoying it. Tell Clara and Marshall hi." She didn't reply for hours, and when she did, it was just, "They say hi back." No details, no little stories about her day like she usually sent. I brushed it off. Maybe she was busy. Maybe she was just relaxing like they said. But that twist in my gut wouldn't go away. By day 2, I was pacing the house, replaying every moment of the wedding in my head. Clara's comments about my job, "It's nice you're so practical," and Marshall's silent stares started to feel heavier. I didn't get why they'd pushed so hard for this trip. Was it really just a family thing? Or was there something else going on? I didn't know it then, but that question would change everything. I'd find out soon enough that the honeymoon glow, the one I thought would last forever, was already fading, and I was the last one to see it. I stood in the kitchen that morning, flipping pancakes like I was some kind of hero, trying to make everything feel normal again. Mira had come back from Scottsdale the night before, and I'd picked her up from the airport with a big grin, expecting her to leap into my arms like she used to. But she didn't. She just gave me this small, tired smile and a quick hug before sliding into the passenger seat. The whole drive home, she stared out the window, barely saying a word. I asked how the trip was, and she mumbled, "Fine, just relaxing," without looking at me. I figured she was exhausted. 4 days with her parents would wear anyone out, right? So I let it go, told myself she'd bounce back after a good night's sleep. But now, standing there with the smell of syrup filling the air, I could feel it. Something was wrong. She sat across from me at the table, her hair still messy from bed, wearing one of my old shirts that used to make me smile seeing her in it. Today, it didn't. She poked at her food with her fork, not eating, just moving it around like she was lost in her head. I tried to catch her eye, but she wouldn't look up. Her laugh, that bright sound I'd hear every morning, was gone. Her hand didn't reach for mine like it always did when we ate together. It was like she was sitting there, but she wasn't really with me. I cleared my throat, tried to lighten things up. So what did you do down there? Swim a lot. Get a tan. She shrugged, still staring at her plate. Yeah, some of that. That was it. Just flat. No spark. I waited, hoping she'd say more, but she didn't. The silence stretched out, heavy and thick, until finally, she put her fork down and looked at me. Her eyes were different, cold, like a wall had gone up between us. I think we should take a break, she said, her voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it. My chest tightened, but I didn't let it show. I didn't yell or ask why or beg her to take it back. I just sat there, staring at her, feeling like the air had been sucked out of the room. A break? We'd been married for less than 2 weeks. My mind raced, but my face stayed calm. Too calm, maybe. I leaned back in my chair, took a slow sip of coffee, and then I smiled. Not a happy smile, but one that said I wasn't surprised, not really. That's funny, I said, standing up and walking over to the counter where I'd left it, the folder. I picked it up, feeling its weight in my hand, and slid it across the table to her. Because I just got some information on that trip. Her eyes flicked to the folder, then back to me, confused. She hesitated, like she wasn't sure she wanted to touch it, but curiosity got the better of her. She pulled it closer, flipped it open, and started reading. The first page was just words, names, dates, a summary Marcus had typed up, but then she turned to the next one, and I saw her breath catch. She flipped faster, her fingers trembling as she went through the stack. Photos spilled out, grainy shots of her by the pool, at a restaurant, on a beach. Her eyes widened, darting over every image, every detail. I stood there, arms crossed, watching her face change, shock, then panic, then something else I couldn't name. She stopped on one photo, staring at it hard, her hands shaking so bad the paper rattled. It was her and him. Theo, laughing together, his arms slung around her shoulder like they'd known each other forever. Clara and Marshall were in the background, smiling like proud parents at a school play. Myra's head snapped up, her gaze locking onto mine for the first time that morning. "What is this?" she whispered, but before I could answer, the front door creaked open behind her. I didn't flinch. I'd heard the car pull up, the footsteps on the porch. Clara and Marshall stepped into the room, all casual like they'd just popped by for coffee. Clara's voice was bright, too bright. "Hope we're not interrupting anything," she said, setting a binder of wedding photos on the counter. Marshall just nodded at me, his face blank as ever. Mira didn't move, didn't turn around. She just kept staring at me, then flicked her eyes to her parents, the folder still open in front of her. I leaned against the counter, sipping my coffee again, letting the moment hang there. She wanted a break? Fine. But she was about to find out what that trip really was, and I wasn't the one who'd have to explain it. I stood in our living room, staring at the spot where Myra's suitcase had been before she left for that trip. The moment she walked out the door with Clara and Marshall, something in me twisted, a knot I couldn't untie. It wasn't just that they'd taken her away so soon after the wedding. It was the way they did it, like it was their right, like I didn't even factor in. Clara had never liked me. I'd known that from the start. She'd drop little jabs about my job, my clothes, my simple life, always with that fake smile plastered on her face. "You're so practical," she'd say, like it was an insult. Marshall was different, quiet, always watching me with those cold, calculating eyes, like he was sizing me up and finding me lacking. I brushed it off before, told myself it didn't matter what they thought as long as Mira loved me. But when they suggested that family trip, out of the blue, just days after I put a ring on her finger, it hit me harder than I wanted to admit. I didn't say no, I should have, but I didn't. Instead, I let her go, waved her off at the airport, and came home to an empty house. That first night alone, I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing her laughing with them, relaxing by some fancy pool, while I sat here like an idiot, waiting. By the second day, that twist in my gut turned into something sharper, doubt. Why did they need her now? What was so urgent? I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it, something they weren't telling me. That's when I picked up the phone and called Marcus. He's my cousin, a private investigator down in Scottsdale, the kind of guy who doesn't ask too many questions if you're family. Hey, man, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Myra's down there with her parents. Can you keep an eye on them? Follow them? Maybe. Especially if someone else shows up. He didn't hesitate. You got it, he said. Anything specific I'm looking for? I paused, not sure how to put it. Just anything that doesn't feel right. I don't know, something's off. He didn't push, just told me he'd get on it and call me back. I hung up, feeling a little stupid but mostly relieved. If it was nothing, I'd laugh it off later. If it wasn't, well, I'd deal with that when it came. Less than 48 hours later, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Check your email. You're gonna want to see this. I grabbed my laptop, heart pounding, and opened the message. There it was, a folder full of files. Videos, photos, receipts, timestamps. I clicked the first video, and my stomach dropped. It wasn't some quiet family retreat. There was Mira, sitting at a restaurant table, laughing, her hair catching the sunlight. Clara and Marshall were there too, but they weren't the problem. It was the guy next to her, some tan, smug-looking jerk with a grin that screamed money. Theo, Marcus called him in the notes. Some rich investor's son, dripping in fake charm, leaning too close to my wife. I watched as he said something, and she laughed again, her real laugh, the one I hadn't heard in days. Clara clapped her hands like it was the best thing she'd ever seen, and Marshall nodded along, all proud. I clicked through the photos next, dinners, drinks by the pool, walks on the beach. Theo's arm around her shoulder, her smiling up at him. Clara snapping pictures like it was a damn photo shoot. Receipts showed they'd all stayed at the same hotel, some swanky place I'd never afford. Marcus even got a shot of Theo handing Mira a drink, their hands brushing, and she didn't pull away. I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling the blood drain from my face. My wife, my brand new wife, wasn't on a relaxing getaway with her parents. She was being paraded around like a prize, introduced to some guy they'd picked out for her. And she didn't push him away. She didn't call me, didn't text me, didn't say a word about any of it. I closed the laptop, my hand shaking, and just sat there in the dark. The house was quiet, but my head was screaming. I trusted her. I trusted them. And this was what I got. It broke me, not in a loud, crashing way, but slow and deep, like a crack splitting through everything I thought we had. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just waited for her to come home, knowing nothing would ever be the same. I stood in our living room, leaning against the counter with my coffee mug in hand, watching the chaos unfold like it was some kind of twisted play I'd bought tickets to. Mira sat at the table, still clutching that folder I'd handed her, her eyes darting between the photos and her parents like she couldn't decide who to yell at first. Clara and Marshall had just walked in, perfect timing, really, acting like nothing was wrong. Clara set that binder of wedding photos down with a little thud, her voice all chipper as she said, "Hope we're not interrupting." I almost laughed right there, but I held it in, took a slow sip of my coffee instead. The bitterness matched the moment. Myra's hands were shaking as she flipped through the pictures again. Dinners with Theo, drinks by the pool, that smug jerk grinning at her like he'd already won something. She'd been quiet since she opened the folder, but now she looked up, her voice sharp and low. "What is this?" She wasn't asking me, though. Her eyes were locked on Clara, who stood there with that tight, fake smile she always wore when she was cornered. Marshall didn't even look up from his phone, just kept scrolling like this was all boring to him. "We just wanted you to meet someone new," Clara said, waving her hand like it was no big deal. "You didn't give us a chance before the wedding, Mira. It was all too rushed, don't you think?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Too rushed? They'd had months to say something, to object, to pull their little stunts before I put a ring on her finger. But no, they waited until after the vows, after the cake, after we danced under those damn string lights. I set my mug down, the clink loud in the tense air, and crossed my arms. Myra's head snapped toward her mom, her face going red. "Meet someone new? Are you serious?" Clara shrugged, like she was explaining why she'd picked a different wine for dinner. "We thought you'd like him. Theo's a good match, successful, charming. We didn't get to weigh him before, so we figured, we?" Mira cut in, her voice rising. "Who's we?" "You and Dad." Marshall finally glanced up, his face blank as ever. "We just wanted to see you happy," he muttered, like that explained everything. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I laughed. It came out loud and bitter, bouncing off the walls. "Happy," I said, stepping closer to the table. "You think dragging her off to meet some rich guy a week after our wedding is about her happiness?" Myra's eyes flicked to me, wide and glassy, but I wasn't done. "You set her up with him, dinners, drinks, beach walks, like she's some prize to hand off. And you, I pointed at Clara. You're standing there acting like it's normal to pimp out your married daughter. Clara's smile dropped, her lips pressing into a thin line. Don't be crude, she snapped. It wasn't like that. We just gave her an option. An option? Myra's voice broke as she shoved the folder away, papers sliding across the table. I'm married. I didn't ask for options. She stood up, her chair scraping the floor, and turned to me. I didn't know they were planning this, I swear. I stared at her, my jaw tight. Did I believe her? Part of me wanted to. God, I wanted to. But those photos were burned into my head. Her laughing with Theo, his arm around her, her not pulling away. You didn't know? I said slowly. But you didn't stop it either, did you? Her mouth opened, then closed, like she didn't have an answer. Clara jumped in, her voice sharp now. Oh, come on, Mira, don't act so innocent. You enjoyed yourself down there. We all saw it. That hit me like a slap. I looked at Mira, waiting for her to deny it, to say something, anything, to prove Clara wrong. But she just stood there, her hands clenched at her sides, her eyes dropping to the floor. I didn't mean for it to happen like that, she whispered. Like what? I pressed, stepping closer. Like you flirting with some guy your parents picked out while I was sitting here thinking you were just relaxing? She flinched, but I didn't back off. You let them take you there, Mira. You let them parade you around like I didn't exist. Marshall cleared his throat, finally putting his phone down. Let's not blow this out of proportion, he said, his tone calm, like he was negotiating a deal. No one forced her to do anything. She could have said no. I turned on him, my voice steady but cold. And you could have stayed out of my marriage. But here we are. The room went quiet, the weight of it all pressing down on us. Clara crossed her arms. Marshall went back to his phone, and Mira just stood there, looking lost. I picked up my coffee again, took a sip, and let the silence stretch. They thought they could play this off like it was nothing. But I wasn't letting it go that easy. I stood there in the living room, my coffee long gone cold in my hand, watching Mira tremble like a leaf caught in a storm. She was still on her feet, the folder of photos scattered across the table like a crime scene, her eyes bouncing between me and her parents. Clara's words hung in the air. We just gave her an option, and I could feel the heat rising in my chest. But I kept it locked down, my face hard as stone. Myra's voice cracked as she turned to her mom. Are you telling me you flew me out there to meet someone else after my wedding? She sounded like she couldn't believe it, like she was hoping Clara would laugh and say it was all a big misunderstanding. But Clara didn't laugh. She scoffed instead, rolling her eyes like Mira was being a kid throwing a tantrum. Sweetheart, don't be so dramatic, she said, smoothing her hair back. We didn't force you into anything. We just wanted options on the table, that's all. Options. Like my wife was a car they were test driving, and Theo was the shiny new model they'd rather park in the garage. I couldn't wrap my head around it, how they could stand there, so calm, so smug, acting like this was normal. Marshall finally piped up, his voice flat and steady, like he was reading a grocery list. Look, Mira, you rushed into this marriage. We didn't get a say. We were just thinking long-term for you, for the family. That's when I lost it, not loud, not yelling, but a laugh ripped out of me, sharp and ugly. It echoed in the room, cutting through their excuses like a knife. Long-term, I said, setting my mug down hard enough to make the table shake. You arranged for your married daughter to flirt with some guy you handpicked like he's a job candidate? You think that's thinking long-term? I turned to Mira, my eyes locking on hers. And you, what? You just went along with it. Her face went pale, her lips parting like she wanted to say something, but nothing came out at first. Then she shook her head fast, her hands flying up. I didn't know they were doing this. Her voice was desperate, pleading, but it didn't hit me the way it used to. I stepped closer, my voice low and tight. Didn't know what, Mira? That he'd kiss your cheek while your mom snapped a photo? That they'd have you laughing and drinking with him like I wasn't waiting back? She froze, her eyes wide, and I could see it. She was replaying it all in her head, every moment I'd seen in those pictures. I didn't, she started, but I cut her off, holding up the photo that had been stuck in my mind since I saw it. Theo's arm around her, her smiling up at him, Clara grinning in the background. You didn't what? I asked. You didn't smile? You didn't let him get close? You didn't enjoy it? She stared at the picture, her hands dropping to her sides, and I could tell she was about to crack. Her mouth opened, her breath hitching like she was going to scream or cry or both. But before she could, Her phone buzzed on the table, loud and sharp, breaking the moment. She flinched, glancing down at it, and I saw the name flash on the screen, Leona, her best friend from Scottsdale. Mira grabbed it, her fingers clumsy, and read the text out loud, her voice shaking. Theo's still in town, bragging that you two were meant to be, that your parents promised him everything. The words hit like a punch, and she looked up slow, her eyes locking on Clara. What does that mean? She whispered. Clara didn't even blink, just tilted her head like it was no big deal. We may have encouraged him a little, she said, her tone light, like she was admitting to buying him a coffee. But he misunderstood. We just gave him a small gift, invited him to dinner. Nothing serious. Myra's jaw dropped, and she stared at her mom like she'd never seen her before. You promised him I'd leave my husband? She asked, her voice rising, cracking at the edges. Clara shrugged, actually shrugged, like it was all just a silly mix-up. We wanted what's best for you, sweetheart. Theo's a catch. We thought you'd see that. I just stood there, watching it all fall apart, my arms crossed tight across my chest. Mira turned to me, her face a mess of shock and guilt. I didn't know, she said again, softer this time, like she was begging me to believe her. But I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Because even if she didn't know the whole plan, she'd still gone along with it, smiling, laughing, letting Theo in while I was here, alone, thinking she was mine. The room went quiet, except for the faint hum of Myra's phone still buzzing with Leona's messages. Clara adjusted her purse, Marshall checked his watch, and Mira just stood there, looking like she might explode. Me? I stayed still, letting it sink in. My wife, my marriage, my whole damn life was a game to them, and I was the only one who hadn't been clued in. I leaned against the counter in the living room, my arms still crossed, watching Mira clutch her phone like it was a lifeline. That text from Leona, Theo's still in town, bragging that you two were meant to be, that your parents promised him everything, hung in the air like smoke, choking the room. Myra's voice had trembled when she read it out loud, and now she was staring at Clara, her eyes wide and wet, waiting for an answer. What does that mean? She'd asked, her words sharp but fragile, like glass about to break. Clara didn't even flinch, just tilted her head with that smug little smile she always had, like she was above it all. We may have encouraged him, she said, her voice smooth and casual, like she was talking about picking out curtains. But he misunderstood. We just gave him a little gift, invited him to dinner. Nothing criminal, Mira. I almost choked on the air. A little gift? Dinner? This wasn't some friendly meet and greet. They'd flown her out there, paraded her around with this guy, and now they were acting like it was no big deal. Myra's head snapped back, her mouth open like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. You promised him I'd leave my husband? She said, her voice climbing higher, shaking harder. Clara shrugged, like it was nothing. We wanted what's best for you, she said. Theo's a good man, successful, from a solid family. We thought you'd see that eventually. I stood there, my jaw tight, feeling the anger bubble up, but keeping it locked down. Best for her? They didn't give a damn about what she wanted, or what I wanted. This was their game, their rules, and I was just the guy in the way. Mira turned to me, her face pale, her eyes pleading. I didn't know, she said again, like it was the only thing she could say. I swear, I didn't know they were planning this. I looked at her, really looked at her, and all I could see were those photos, her laughing with Theo, his arm around her, her not pushing him away. You didn't know? I said, my voice low and steady. But you didn't stop it either, did you? She flinched, her hands twisting together, and I could tell she was scrambling for something to say. It wasn't like that, she whispered. I thought it was just friendly. I didn't think. You didn't think. I cut in, stepping closer. You didn't think it'd look bad to let some guy hang all over you while your parents cheered him on? You didn't think to call me, to tell me what was going on. She shook her head fast, tears starting to spill over. I didn't want to worry you. I thought it was nothing, just mom and dad being them. I laughed, short and bitter. Them? You mean the people who think our marriage is a mistake they can fix with a better offer? Clara jumped in, her voice sharp now. That's enough, she said, pointing at me. You're blowing this out of proportion. We didn't force her to do anything. She could have walked away. Walked away. I turned on her, my voice rising for the first time. You flew her out there, stuck her in a hotel with this guy, and fed her lies about how he's her future. What was she supposed to do? Run back home with no car, no plan, while you two kept pushing? Marshall cleared his throat, finally looking up from his phone. Let's calm down, he said, his tone flat. No one's saying we planned a divorce. We just thought she'd see reason. Reason. That word hit me like a brick. They thought I was the unreasonable one, the guy she'd married, the guy she'd promised to love, the guy who'd been waiting here like a fool while they played matchmaker. Mira sank back into her chair, her hands covering her face. I can't believe this, she muttered. I can't believe you'd do this to me. Clara sighed, like she was tired of explaining herself. Mira, we've always wanted you to have the best. This marriage, it was fast. We didn't get a chance to guide you. Guide me. Myra's head shot up, her voice cracking. You think setting me up with some guy behind my husband's back is guiding me? I watched her, waiting to see if she'd turn that anger on me too. Blame me for digging this up, for putting it all out there. But she didn't. She just sat there, staring at her parents like they were strangers. I didn't sleep with him, she said suddenly, looking at me now. I didn't. I wouldn't do that. Her eyes were begging me to believe her, but I didn't say anything. I just nodded once, letting her words sit there. Maybe she didn't sleep with him, but she'd let him in, let them all in, and that cut just as deep. The room went quiet again, the tension thick enough to choke on. Clara adjusted her purse, Marshall tapped his phone, and Mira wiped her eyes. I stayed where I was, watching my wife realize she'd been a pawn in their game, and wondering if she'd ever really been mine at all. I stood in the kitchen the next day, staring at the coffee pot like it could fix everything if I just brewed it strong enough. After that blowout with Mira and her parents, I'd slept on the couch, not because she asked me to, but because I couldn't stand being in our bed, smelling her shampoo on the pillows, pretending everything was fine. She'd gone upstairs after Clara and Marshall left, her face red and puffy from crying, and I didn't follow. I needed space, time to think, time to figure out what came next. The folder was still on the table, photos peeking out like a bad memory I couldn't shake. I'd shown her the truth, but it didn't feel like a win. It felt like a punch to the gut that kept on giving. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't letting this fester in the dark anymore. If Clara and Marshall wanted to play their little game, I'd drag it into the light for everyone to see. So I sent out invitations, short, simple texts to Clara, Marshall, Mira, Theo, and a handful of friends and family who'd been at the wedding. Photo shoot at the venue. I wrote, one last memory from the big day. Be there at 6. Clara replied right away with a cheery, oh, how lovely. We'll be there. Mira texted back a hesitant, is this necessary? I didn't sugarcoat it. Yeah, I wrote. It's time people knew the truth. She didn't argue after that, just sent a quiet, okay. The rest confirmed quick. Leona, Marcus, a few cousins who danced with us under those string lights. Even Theo RSVP'd with a cocky, wouldn't miss it. I smirked at that. Good. Let him walk right into it. That evening, I got to the venue early, the same place we'd gotten married, with its big open room and wooden beams, the spot where I'd thought we'd started something real. I set up a projector, hooked it to my laptop, and laid out the evidence Marcus had sent me. Photos, videos, receipts, all of it. The reception table was still there, the one we'd cut the cake on, and I dragged it to the center, piling the files on top. People started trickling in, Leona first, giving me a nod like she knew something was up. Then Marcus, who clapped me on the shoulder and said, you sure about this, man? I nodded. Yeah, no more hiding. Clara and Marshall showed up next. Clara in pearls like she was going to a gala. Marshall in his usual suit, phone already in hand. Mira came in behind them, quiet, her eyes darting to me and then away. She looked small, like the weight of it all was crushing her, but I didn't soften. Not yet. Then Theo swaggered in, tanned and grinning, acting like he owned the place. Nice spot, he said, winking at Mira. She didn't smile back. I waited until everyone was settled, about 20 people, some curious, some confused, then stepped to the front. Thanks for coming, I said, my voice steady. Thought we'd take a look back at the wedding and what's happened since. I clicked the projector on, and the first slide lit up the wall. A photo of Mira and me cutting the cake, smiling, happy. There were a few us from the crowd, but I didn't linger. Next slide, Scottsdale. Mira at the pool with Theo, his arm around her. A murmur rippled through the room. I clicked again, dinner, Theo leaning close, Clara laughing. Then the beach walk, the drinks, the hotel receipts. With every slide, the whispers grew louder, eyes darting to Mira, to her parents, to me. She sank lower in her chair, her hands over her face. Clara's smile tightened, but she didn't move. Theo shifted, looking less smug now. Then I played the video. Marcus had caught it from a distance, Clara's voice clear as day, saying, This marriage is just a phase. Theo's the real future. The room went dead silent, like someone had sucked the air out. I let it hang there, the words echoing, then turned the projector off. That's it, I said, crossing my arms. That's what they've been up to while I've been here, thinking I had a wife. Mira stood up fast, her chair scraping loud. I didn't know, she shouted, her voice breaking. I didn't plan this. I looked at her, my chest tight. Maybe not, I said. But you didn't stop it either. Clara jumped in, her voice sharp. This is ridiculous. You're making a scene over nothing. Theo nodded, trying to play it cool. Yeah, man, chill. It's not like we shut up, I snapped, cutting him off. You don't get to talk. He blinked, surprised, and sat back down. The room buzzed, friends whispering, cousins glaring at Clara and Marshall. Leona stood up, arms crossed. You guys are unbelievable, she said to Myra's parents. She's married, and you're shopping her around like she's for sale? Marshall finally spoke, his tone calm. It's not like that. We just gave Theo a chance to meet her. I laughed, cold and hard. A chance? You gave him a weekend suite and a promise. The truth was out now, raw and ugly, and I stood there, watching it sink in, wondering if I just burned everything down or set myself free. I stood in the middle of that venue, the projector still humming behind me, watching the room explode into silence so thick it felt like I could touch it. The video had just finished, Clara's voice saying, "This marriage is just a phase. Theo's the real future," and it was like a bomb had gone off, leaving nothing but stunned faces and wide eyes. Mira was on her feet, her hands shaking, her voice cracking as she yelled. I didn't know. I'd heard that line too many times now, and it didn't hit me the same anymore. I just looked at her, my arms crossed, and said, maybe not. But you didn't stop it either. That shut her up fast. She sank back into her chair, her face buried in her hands. Clara jumped in, her voice sharp and high, like she could still control this. This is ridiculous, she snapped, standing up straighter in her pearls. You're making a scene over nothing. Theo nodded, trying to back her up, his grin fading but still clinging to that cocky edge. Yeah, man, chill. It's not like we shut up, I said, my voice cutting through his like a blade. He blinked, startled, and sat back down, his hands up like he was surrendering. The room buzzed, friends whispering, cousins shooting glares at Clara and Marshall, Leona glaring like she wanted to throw punches. Then Mira found her voice again, turning to her parents. Mom, Dad, did you pay him? She asked, her words slow and heavy, like she was afraid of the answer. Marshall looked up from his phone, finally putting it down, his face blank as ever. A few gifts, he said, shrugging. A weekend suite. It's not illegal. Theo piped up, his voice softer now, like he was trying to save himself. I thought it was love, he said, glancing at Mira. She whipped around to face him, her eyes blazing. Love? You thought I'd just leave my husband because you showed up with a tan and a smile? I couldn't help it. I laughed, short and bitter. Guess he's not as smart as your parents thought. Theo's face went red, but he didn't say anything back. Mira turned to me, her eyes wet and desperate. I didn't know, she said again, stepping closer. I swear, I didn't sleep with him. I didn't, but you didn't stop it, I said, my voice steady, cutting her off. You let it happen. You laughed, smiled, shared drinks. You let them decide who you should end up with. She reached for my hand, her fingers brushing mine, but I pulled back. Don't, I said, and she froze, her arm dropping like it weighed a ton. The room was spinning now, everyone talking at once, voices overlapping. Theo turned on Clara, his cool cracking. You said she wanted out, he barked, pointing at her. Clara snapped back, her composure slipping. She would have, if he hadn't stuck his nose in. She jabbed a finger at me, her face twisting like I was the villain here. I just stood there, letting it all crash around me. Leona stepped forward, her arms crossed tight. You're disgusting, she said to Clara. She's your daughter, not some doll you can trade up when you don't like the groom. A few cousins nodded, muttering agreement, and one of them, my cousin Jake, called out, what kind of parents pull this crap? Clara spun on him, her voice rising. We were protecting her future. He's not good enough. She pointed at me again, and that was it. The room erupted. People shouting, chairs scraping, Mira crying louder now, saying, stop it, just stop, over and over. I didn't move, didn't yell back. I just watched, letting them tear each other apart. Marshall tried to play peacemaker, standing up with his hands out. Everyone calm down, he said, like he could still fix this. It's not what it looks like. It's exactly what it looks like, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. You tried to sell my wife to some rich kid because you didn't like me. And she let you try. Mira sobbed, shaking her head. I didn't mean to, but you did, I said, looking right at her. You didn't call me. You didn't walk away. You stayed. She crumpled, sitting back down, her hands over her face again. Theo stood up, grabbing his jacket. I'm out, he muttered, heading for the door. You people are crazy. Clara shouted after him. You're not innocent here. But he didn't stop. The cousins started arguing with Marshall. Leona was still ripping into Clara, and Mira just sat there, broken. I stepped back, leaning against the table, the folder still open behind me. The truth was out, ugly, loud, and messy, and I didn't feel better. I felt empty. Everyone knew now, but it didn't fix anything. Mira looked up at me, her eyes begging for something, forgiveness, maybe, or a way back. But I didn't have it to give. I'm sorry, she whispered, but I just shook my head. The chaos kept going, voices bouncing off the walls, but I tuned it out. This was their mess now. I'd done my part. I stood in the kitchen 2 weeks later, stirring a pot of soup I didn't even want, just trying to keep my hands busy. The fallout from that night at the venue hit fast and hard, like a storm I'd kicked up but couldn't control. Mira moved out the next day, packed a bag, said she needed space, and left without looking back. I didn't stop her. I didn't say much at all, just watched her go, the door clicking shut behind her like the end of something I'd been holding onto too tight. The house felt empty after that, too big and too quiet, but I didn't mind. It was better than pretending everything was fine. Clara and Marshall tried to spin it their way, calling up relatives and friends with some story about how it wasn't working out, and it was mutual. I heard it secondhand from my cousin Jake, Clara's voice all smooth and sad, like she was the victim here. They just weren't compatible, she'd said. We saw it coming. Compatible. That word stuck in my throat, bitter and wrong. They didn't care about compatibility when they were shoving Theo in her face, smiling for the camera while I sat here like a fool. But their little lie didn't hold up long. Theo couldn't keep his mouth shut. He started posting online, pictures from Scottsdale, tagging Mira in shots of them by the pool, at dinner, on the beach. Good times with good people. He captioned one, smirking in the frame. Then he dropped a video, him laughing, saying, her parents knew we were the real deal. That's when it blew up. Leona saw it first, sent me a screenshot with a quick, this idiot's digging his own grave. She wasn't wrong. The story spread fast. Friends shared it. Family called me asking what the hell was going on, and pretty soon it hit X, where people I didn't even know were picking it apart. Who does this to their own kid? One post read. Shady as hell, said another. Clara's event planning business took a hit. Vendors canceled, clients backed out, saying they didn't trust her anymore. Marshall got dropped from some board he'd been on, a quiet email letting him know his personal conduct didn't align with their values. Theo? He vanished, deleted his accounts, and went dark after the backlash hit. I didn't feel sorry for any of them. They'd made their bed, and now they were lying in it. Mira reached out after 2 weeks, a text that popped up while I was eating alone at the table. Can we talk? It said. I stared at it for a long time, my thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let her sit with the mess she'd helped make. But I wasn't that guy. Not yet, anyway. Sure, I texted back. Come by tomorrow. She showed up at noon, standing on the porch like she wasn't sure she was welcome. I let her in, pointed to the couch, and sat across from her in the armchair. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes, her hair pulled back messy, like she hadn't slept much. I'm sorry, she started, her voice small. I know I keep saying that, but I mean it. I didn't see what they were doing until it was too late. I nodded, letting her talk, my hands resting on my knees. I didn't want Theo, she said, looking at me now. I didn't want any of it. I didn't know how to stop them. They've always been like that, pushing, pulling, deciding what's best for me. I should have told you. I should have left. Yeah, I said, my voice flat. You should have. She winced, but I didn't soften it. You weren't just married to me, Mira, I went on. You were married to them. Every step of the way, they had their hands on you, and you let them. Her eyes filled up, tears spilling over, but I didn't move. I messed up, she said, wiping her face. I know I did, but I love you. I still do. Those words hit me hard, stirring up something I'd buried under all the anger and hurt. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the girl I danced with under the string lights, the one I'd promised forever to. But I also saw the girl in those photos, laughing with Theo, letting her parents steer her away from me. I believe you, I said finally, slow and careful. But that doesn't fix it. You didn't fight for us. You didn't even try. And I can't forget that. She cried harder, nodding like she'd expected it. I don't know how to make it right, she said. You can't, I told her, standing up. Not now. Maybe not ever. She stayed for a while, crying, talking, begging me to give her a chance, but I didn't budge. When she left, the house went quiet again, and I sat there, staring at the spot where she'd been. I wasn't mad anymore, not like before. I just felt done. The world knew the truth now, and so did I. That was enough for today, at least. I stood in the middle of the venue again, the same one where Mira and I had gotten married, but this time it felt different, like a weight had lifted, even if the scars were still there. It was a month after she'd moved out, a month since that messy night with the projector and the shouting, a month since the world saw what her parents had tried to pull. Tonight, I wasn't here to fight or prove anything. I was here to let it go. I'd invited my real family, my real friends, the people who'd stuck by me through all this crap. No Clara, no Marshall, no Theo, no Mira. Just the ones who mattered. The room smelled like cake and coffee, and there was laughter bouncing off the walls, real and warm, not the fake stuff I'd gotten used to. I'd set up a few tables, nothing fancy, just some folding chairs, a spread of food, and a playlist of songs that didn't remind me of her. Leona showed up first, hugging me tight and saying, "You look better, you know that?" I smiled, a real one, not the tight-lipped thing I'd been faking for weeks. "Feel better," I told her. Marcus came next, clapping me on the back and handing me a beer. "Proud of you, man," he said. "Takes guts to burn it all down and walk away." I nodded, popping the cap off. Didn't feel like guts at the time, just felt like surviving. More people trickled in. My cousins, Jake and Sarah, who'd been at the wedding and the blowout, grinning like they were glad to see me standing tall. My buddy Tom from work, who'd texted me every day after Mira left, just to check in. Even my mom showed up, fussing over the food and telling me I needed to eat more. It wasn't a big crowd, maybe 20 people, but it was enough. The room filled up with noise, talking, laughing, the clink of plates, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. We ate, swapped stories, and I let myself relax, leaning back in my chair, watching them all. Leona told everyone how she'd ripped into Clara that night, making them laugh, and Marcus bragged about his sneaky camera work in Scottsdale, calling himself the family spy. It was light, easy, the kind of night I hadn't had since before the wedding. After a while, I stood up, tapping my beer bottle with a spoon to get their attention. The room quieted down, all eyes on me, and I took a deep breath. "Hey, thanks for coming," I said, my voice steady. "I know the last few months have been a lot. You've all seen it, the good, the bad, the ugly, and you're still here. That means something." A few nods, a couple of smiles. I went on. "I thought losing Mira was the end of me, you know? Like I'd failed at the one thing I wanted most. But I figured something out. Sometimes a broken vow is a blessing in disguise." I raised my bottle. To starting over. They cheered, lifting their drinks, and I took a long sip, feeling the words settle in my chest. It wasn't just talk, I meant it. Losing her hurt like hell, but staying tied to that family, to their games and their lies, would have been worse. I sat back down, and the night rolled on. Cake got cut, music got louder, and Jake even dragged me out to dance, laughing when I stepped on his toes. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. As the hours passed, I stepped outside for some air, leaning against the railing where Mira and I had stood that wedding night, looking at the stars. I could still see her in that white dress, smiling up at me, promising forever. For a second, it stung. The memory, the what could have been, but then I let it go. She wasn't here anymore, and I didn't need her to be. I'd spent weeks replaying it all. Her laugh with Theo, Clara's smug face, Marshall's cold stares. But tonight, I didn't feel bitter. I felt awake, like I'd finally opened my eyes after a long, bad dream. Leona came out, standing next to me, her hands in her pockets. "You good?" she asked. I nodded, looking out at the dark. "Yeah, better than good." She smiled. "She's still asking about you, you know? Mira called me yesterday, wanted to know if you'd softened up." I shrugged. "Doesn't matter. I'm done looking back." Leona bumped my shoulder. "That's my boy." We stood there a while, quiet, the party noise drifting out behind us. When I went back in, They were still laughing, still eating, still celebrating. I grabbed another slice of cake, sat with Marcus and Tom, and let myself laugh too. This was my ending. Not the one I'd planned, not the one with Mira by my side, but a better one. I was free, not just from her, but from the weight of it all. And that was worth toasting to.